So many people are missing the deeper symbolism here, and I think we need to talk about it. I'm Dia Ghoul. Welcome to my channel where we have spooky talks about spooky topics. Today we will be covering one of the best body horror films to date, 2024's The Substance. Not only will we be discussing the movie itself, but we will be diving into the symbolism that you may or may not have missed. My main takeaway from this movie is that it is about the destructive nature of beauty standards and the effect that that has on women. Many people, when interpreting this movie, I think get hung up on the fact that our main character is an aging star. Of course, age is a very significant factor when it comes to misogyny and beauty standards, but there are so many signs here that it goes beyond that. This movie really is about beauty standards as a whole. We start this movie with a shot of an egg being injected with the substance. Then we watch the egg split into two. This is obvious foreshadowing for what is to come in the rest of the movie, but I think this egg imagery is a little bit deeper than that. The egg represents fertility and youth. These are intrinsically linked with beauty standards and the way that women are valued in society. This idea is actually clarified when we move on to see the scene with Elizabeth's Hollywood star. When she's young and first starting out, the star's first being installed, everyone is taking pictures of her, fawning over her, telling her that they love her. Then, over time, we see fewer and fewer people stopping to admire her star. We start to see people saying things to each other such as, "Oh, do you remember her?" And "Who's that?" Eventually, people just walk right past it, not taking note of it at all. This shows us directly that her fame as well as her perceived value fades as she ages. There is a very significant detail regarding my analysis that I almost missed. As a Wisconsin girl, I would have missed this entirely, but I saw this noted online by a Reddit user. This Reddit user pointed out that in this scene, there's a part where big fat flakes of snow fall onto her star. What my Wisconsin ass didn't think about is that this isn't normal. There shouldn't be snow here. What this means is that this movie is not rooted in reality. I have seen many people when reviewing this or analyzing this discuss and ponder at what point the movie stops being rooted in reality. Because, as we know, the further along we go, the more absurd and unrealistic the details start to get. But this scene right here shows us that none of this is rooted in reality. What this tells me is that this is not a movie we are supposed to judge at face value. We are not supposed to analyze this movie at face value. What we're supposed to do is look into these details, look into the symbolism, and find the story behind the story. Now we are introduced to our main character, Elizabeth, as she films an episode of her aerobics show, Sparkle Your Life. Here, Elizabeth looks so happy and fulfilled, and that energy extends to all of the women featured on her show alongside her. I think it should be noted that all of these women are what would be categorized as mature women, around 50 years old. This happy, almost teamwork sort of attitude is a huge contrast to what her show will later become. Today is Elizabeth's 50th birthday, and we see all smiles and warmth as all of her many colleagues wish her a happy birthday. And she seems genuinely grateful of these kind gestures. As this happens, we see Elizabeth walk through a hall. The walls are completely filled, both sides, with her posters. I think that these walls full of posters not only represent her accomplishments, but are also a subtle cue that her metaphorical clock is ticking. Of course, this idea of a metaphorical ticking clock seems solely reserved for women. All of these posters along the walls show us that there is no room for any more posters. Her time is up. This point is made just a few moments later when Elizabeth has to go in the men's restroom, And here she overhears her boss, I will call him the producer, she overhears him discussing her impending replacement. He goes on about how they need a fresh young face. They need something new. Elizabeth is too old, and he says this all in a much more shitty, misogynistic way than I'm saying it, and I feel bad enough saying it the way I am. The character of the producer is one of our first obvious signs that this isn't rooted in reality, because he's just so over-the-top absurd with his actions, his behaviors, the way he talks. He is clearly a caricature of a patriarchal misogynist, and they could not have made that any more clear. Trust me. After the producer breaks the news to Elizabeth officially, she is driving home and sees a picture of her face being ripped off of a billboard. This, being the ultimate symbol of her loss, obviously distracts her while she's driving, and this results in a wreck. Frazzled but unharmed, we see her being examined by a doctor in a hospital. The doctor takes a look at his chart and sees that it's Elizabeth's birthday. Meaning it as a kind gesture, he wishes her a happy birthday. But after the news that Elizabeth has just received, to hear happy birthday is devastating. And watching her break down in this scene is just absolutely heart-wrenching. And I hate how much this really mirrors reality. Think of all the women who lie about their age. There are so many women out there who see becoming older as a black stain on their life. They don't see it as another year to celebrate. They see it as another year of being old and worthless. Then, after the doctor awkwardly leaves the room, we meet a young male nurse who I'm going to call 207 for reasons I'll go over later. 207 examines Elizabeth's spine, deems her a good candidate for something, an unknown something, and then he sends her on her way. When she's leaving, she reaches in her coat pocket and realizes that the nurse slipped a flash drive in there, along with a note that says, "This changed my life." Now, before she can really start to question this too much, a man approaches her. This man is an old friend of hers from back in school. He even comes up and calls her Lizzie Sparkle. Everyone else knows her as Elizabeth Sparkle. He is so happy to see her. He wants to catch up sometime, so he gives her his number. We don't get back to Fred for a while, but we will get back to him. So the flash drive that Elizabeth got from 207 was an advertisement for the substance. This advertisement vaguely goes over the promises that they deliver, which is a new, younger, more perfect self. And they also vaguely, very vaguely go over the guidelines. You must switch every 7 days. And remember, you are one. They do not elaborate whatsoever on these rules or how this is supposed to work. They do explain that you are the Matrix and that there will be an other self, but they don't explain what the hell this other self is or how it's going to come to be. Now, this ad directly mirrors real-life ads for beauty products, programs, and procedures. These are all marketed for beauty and youth. They promise a more young, a better, a more successful self out of you from using this product or this program or getting this procedure. But of course, there's always a catch. In this case, that catch is the switch. See, even in the universe of the substance, there is no real cure for aging. There is no cure that will permanently make you young and attractive and perfect and beautiful. That just isn't possible. That's why they need to switch every 7 days. And of course, in real life, this is also true. When you use a beauty product or get a procedure done, you need to maintain that over time. Otherwise, you're going to end up exactly how you were, if not worse. Now, the remember you are one rule clearly has dire consequences in the context of this movie universe. To forget that you are one in the context of in real life beauty can lead to horrific consequences like eating disorders, body dysmorphia, and self-harm, self-hate. A very prevalent theme in this movie is duality of self, And we start to see this even before she takes the substance. We see this when the camera pans between the picture of Elizabeth's portrait on the wall, of her happy, beaming, smiling face, in contrast to her current miserable expression. When Elizabeth goes to retrieve her package, she is sent to this sketchy alleyway with a key code thing and a door, and she punches in the code, and then the door opens a little bit. This forces Elizabeth on her hands and knees to enter the building to get in there to get her package. This is a metaphorical test of submission and degradation to prove herself worthy of the substance. Now, initially, when this happened with the door, when I first saw it, I thought that they just wanted a higher level of security. They thought maybe people wouldn't bother if they thought the door was broken. But that was before I realized that none of this is rooted in reality. Logical reasoning has no bearing here. Logical reasoning does not explain away anything in this movie. Everything that happens has to mean something. So Elizabeth moves on and finds herself in a very sterile, white, empty room with a row of lockers on the wall. One of these lockers is assigned to herself with the number 503. Only one other locker is assigned a number, the number 207. As you can imagine, 207 must be the nurse from earlier. Now, I think one of the main metaphorical purposes for 207 is to show us that beauty standards also affect men as well. Women, as a class, as a sex, as a group, as a whole, are affected from beauty standards pretty much from the moment they're born, but that doesn't mean that men aren't also affected. And I think that is one of the major purposes of 207. He shows us that men can go through this exact same type of suffering. Next, Elizabeth returns home and examines the contents of her package. This includes a syringe and capsules for the stabilizer, food for the matrix and the other self, and of course, the substance. The substance is fluorescent neon green liquid. And I think that the substance is portrayed this way to show how people, especially women, will put harmful, toxic substances inside of their bodies to try to be beautiful. They will put their own health at risk, and I think that they wanted to make this obvious to us in the appearance of the substance. Another subtle hint of this is there are a few times throughout the movie where we see that the vial of the substance is being stored with other beauty products under the sink. The scene where Elizabeth takes the substance, a scene that I like to call Sue's birth, is one of the most impressive in the entire film, as far as practical effects and symbolism go. Before taking the injection, we see Elizabeth scrutinizing herself in front of the bathroom mirror in the nude. The camera pans over every inch of her naked body, hyper-focusing on her perceived flaws. You know, dips, divots, wrinkles, stretch marks, things like that. And when she takes the substance, the effects are not painless, and that much is made very clear. Elizabeth collapses in agony and disorientation. Her eyes start to split in two while still in her head, creating new from old, like an asexual reproduction of cells. This is just like the egg we saw at the beginning of the film. Soon enough, a fully formed, fully developed adult human being emerges from Elizabeth's back, which is split wide open in a gruesome display. Talk about back labor, am I right? That's stupid. Leave it in. Elizabeth's other self now takes over. This is where we're introduced to Sue. Now, this scene in many ways is reminiscent of giving birth, but obviously in a very bastardized, artificial, unnatural way. Instead of enhancing herself or loving herself for who she is basically creating a whole artificial self. And after Sue emerges, she sees the damage that she has done to Elizabeth with a mortified look on her face, sews her up and cleans up the mess. To me, This is a part of Elizabeth seeing the damage that she's done to herself already, but she's trying not to worry about that. She's trying to just forget about it. This is a clear moral dilemma. That part of Elizabeth that's in Sue sees the damage that she has done to herself, but that battles with the part of her that longs to be beautiful and young and valuable. Seeing Elizabeth laying on the floor like that, practically dead, this to me represents the feeling of a temporary death of self when forced to submit to beauty standards. That is definitely a feeling that I've felt, and I know I'm not the only one. Now, after Sue has entered the picture, is where the theme of duality of self truly begins. Sue examines herself in the mirror, in awe at her flawless perfection. Now, I found out that they went through, let's say, extra steps to make Sue look as perfect as she does. It turns out that they had her use breast prosthetics to make them look plasticky, too perfect. And I'll say they did a damn good job, because the first time around when I saw it, I had no idea that there were prosthetics involved, but I just had this uncanny valley kind of feeling about Sue, about her body. Something just seemed off. So I think they achieved what they were trying to achieve extremely well. Before long, Sue needs to stabilize. Now, the stabilize step is not for the faint of heart. She has to take a needle and shove it into Elizabeth's spine and steal her spinal fluid. And she uses that to maintain her physical form. This step shows that the chase for beauty is constant, and that to obtain it, you must drain the life from your true self. Sue, wanting to explore the options for her new perfect self, auditions to be Elizabeth's replacement on the aerobics show. One thing I'd like to note is that on her way to this audition, we see Sue wearing Elizabeth's signature yellow jacket. As far as I could tell, this is the only scene that we see Sue wearing this jacket. Say that 5 times fast, huh? See Sue wear this jacket? This yellow jacket represents that little bit of Elizabeth, that true piece of Elizabeth that always shines through. And we will definitely be getting back to that one later. So I think that this partially shows that this is before Elizabeth and Sue start to completely split as personalities, start to forget that they are one. At this audition, we see 2 male casting agents making horrifically misogynistic remarks.
Too bad her boobs aren't in the middle of her face instead of that nose.
These characters are so absurdly misogynistic because they are basically like caricatures, just like the producer character. There are other examples of this, and I would say that most of the male characters in this movie are examples of this. Not all of them, but we'll get to those when we get to them. These misogynistic agents love what they see when they see Sue, and they just cannot wait to give her the job. After this, we follow Sue over the rest of her week as she basks in glitz and glamour. And really, when you take a good hard look at it, that is all she does. She is simply spending all of her time looking good, doing nothing. This really shows us the hollow, shallow, surface-level existence of Sue. Though Sue is one with Elizabeth, as far as symbolism goes, her purpose in this is that she is not a full-fleshed, real character. She's not really supposed to be a person, but an ideal, a fantasy. Real people spend their time doing things, but Sue is just constantly performing basically for the male gaze, even when she's completely by herself. That is the entire basis of her existence. When Elizabeth takes over again for the first time, she is already suffering from this experience. Her massive back wound still healing. This really mirrors plastic surgery. Many cosmetic procedures are told to be agonizing at first, but it's worth it in the end, right? The substance must be the same, right? We're met with another egg visual. This time 2 eggs frying in a pan. This reminds us again of Elizabeth's biological clock. Youth and fertility are tied to women's worth in society. And at her age, at this stage in her life, she's cooked. Elizabeth then stops by her old workplace just as they're hauling away the last of her posters. The producer sees her and shoves in her arms a box full of personal belongings, along with a gift. We later learn that this gift is a cookbook. I am sure you can see the sexist connotations there, but I can't help but feel that this also shows us, once again, at her age, she's cooked. The bare walls in this hallway signify the erasure of her accomplishments, and therefore the erasure of her worth. Elizabeth then goes home and spends the rest of her week watching TV, waiting for her time to be up. During this time period, we also see Elizabeth marking off her calendar week by week with Sue and X. This shows that she has already lost her sense of worth when she can't reach this beauty ideal. During our next switch, we see very clearly displayed that Elizabeth has red nail polish on her toenails, whereas Sue has red nail polish on her fingernails. Red nail polish is a classic symbol of beauty. The red nail polish being on Elizabeth's toes represents that, in a way, her beauty is behind her. Her beauty is not as visible to the world as Sue's, which are painted on her fingernails. So Sue, while being the conventional beauty on the outside, is only one half to this whole. And yes, I did paint my nails red for the occasion. Sue, walking around the apartment, sees the TV on, the remote out, and a big butt dent in the chair. Disgusted at Elizabeth's laziness, we start to see that contempt and resentment start to come to the surface. Obviously, these negative feelings between the two will grow as we go on. By the way, I just wanted to throw out there that my interpretation of this movie is that Sue and Elizabeth literally are one. They share one consciousness. They are two separate bodies, but they are one consciousness. When I've seen other people review and analyze this movie, a lot of them seem to think that one consciousness is unaware of the other one, and it does initially appear that way. But I think that this is a manifestation of Elizabeth's denial. She is told repeatedly, over and over again, remember, you are one. The whole problem is she's not remembering that. Now, there are a few pieces of evidence throughout this movie, but there is a really, really important, huge piece of evidence that point towards my theory, and I'll get to that when we come to it. I do like to think it's okay to interpret things differently, but in this case, I just can't help but feel like the other people are wrong. I'm sorry. They are the same person. They have the same consciousness. I will refer to them almost as if they're two separate people for simplicity's sake and because I think they symbolically have different representations. But they are the same person. Sue becomes so sick of being reminded of Elizabeth that she goes so far as to build a room to hide her in. To become ideal, we must hide our true selves, and really that is the basis for beauty standards. I mean, think about it. It's always about altering yourself, taking things off, adding things on. There isn't much of a beauty standard that's just existing as you are. Really think about it. No matter how you look, no matter how conventionally attractive you are, there will still be perceived flaws by society that you, as a woman, are expected to fix. Body hair is just one example, but there are a lot of them. So Sue, being the beauty standard, is hiding away her true self, Elizabeth. Now this is where we are introduced to douchebag misogynist neighbor guy. I will be calling him by a few different titles throughout this, but trust me, you'll know who I'm talking about. So he comes up to the door, getting all angry about the noise because he thinks that Elizabeth is still there. But when he sees Sue answer the door, his tune changes. Now he thinks it's great when people in the apartment building are doing stuff, and he thinks they should do stuff together sometime. Now, this guy is another one of those misogynistic caricatures, and he is just painfully insufferable. Like, any woman who's dealt with unwanted advances has dealt with this guy. That's pretty much what this guy represents, is unwanted advances. And I hate him. I hate him so much. But then she just kinda politely shoos him off and we're on. Next, we get to see Sue's show, Pump It Up. Framed as a workout show, a modernized version of Sparkle Your Life. Really, all it is just softcore fat material. Let's be real with ourselves. Hyper-focusing on the ladies' assets, this show symbolizes the erasure of valuable women's entertainment, often replaced with male-gazy material just like this crap. These shows are framed as for women and something that women should aspire to and look up to, despite these shows being by and for men. This also reiterates the hollowness behind Sue. She lacks a genuine sense of self, going so far as to hide her true self away that all she can really do is focus on her body and her sex appeal. Really, without Elizabeth, there is no substance to her show. Get it? Substance? I'll see myself out. I also wanted to note about this scene. I think the male backup dancers symbolize the gay men who are affected by these beauty standards. I'm not particularly saying that these backup dancers are gay, but if you look at the way they're dressed and you think about who would be watching this content, who would enjoy seeing them in this situation, it is very much showing these men being sexualized and objectified in a very similar way that women are, and that tends to be the case with gay men. It is kind of rare to see women sexualizing men in the same way that men sexualize women and other men. But again, this seemingly being a female-centered movie, they placed these men at the back behind the female dancers to signify that though it is a problem, it is much more of a class problem for women. I also think a lot of this mirrors how in movies you get so much male representation and you might have the token woman character, whereas here, most of the men are shit and the few who are not shit are token male characters. After filming, Sue walks down our hallway we've been seeing before with her very first lone poster hung up on the wall. This solidifies her place as the next big hot star. This shows just how replaceable Elizabeth is, and this concept goes for women as a whole. You can easily be replaced with somebody younger and more beautiful than you. Sue is now coming home after a night out. She has brought with her a new boy toy named Troy. We'll get back to his importance later. Unfortunately, when things are getting hot and heavy, Sue realizes it's time to switch. But she decides that a few extra hours won't hurt. So she takes just a little bit of extra stabilizer fluid. These extra few hours have a horrific effect on Elizabeth, causing one of her index fingers to age rapidly and become almost disfigured. Now, this clearly represents the catastrophic effects that beauty products and procedures can have on the human body. Sadly, when she calls customer service, she learns that this damage is irreversible. And sadly, this is often the case in real life as well. On this call, when Elizabeth blames Sue for stealing time, she is harshly reminded to remember you are one, and urged to respect the balance. Elizabeth is becoming so lost in the illusion of becoming her ideal self that she is losing her sense of self. This is what is causing this sort of personality split between Elizabeth and Sue. This duality of self theme I keep coming back to. She just can't recognize the damage she's inflicting on herself in her chase for beauty and acceptance. Now we see resentment build in Elizabeth as she watches Sue's new show, Pump It Up, on TV. Now creep douche neighbor makes another appearance, pounding on the door, trying to get Sue's attention. But of course, Sue isn't here right now. And he insists through the door that she must come over. He says this in a very territorial, demanding, unflattering way. Seeing an attractive woman with her body on display seems to give men like this the idea that they can just do whatever the hell they want and push her around, and that she has to entertain them. And it's disgusting. I hate this guy. If you do that, I hate you. Sparkle Your Life and everything that Elizabeth loves has become cheapened by sex appeal. But Elizabeth's longing for acceptance has blinded her to this. And instead, she becomes consumed by jealousy. After dodging creepo neighbor, Elizabeth goes to get her refill order. Though this scene is shot in the exact same way as the first time she went to retrieve her order, her body language tells a much different story. At first, she was curious and desperate, but now she seems almost ashamed of what she's doing. This very much mirrors the shame that's associated with harmful beauty routines. Following this, Elizabeth stops at a diner. And there are a couple important things to note about this scene. First, when we see Elizabeth sit down, she is greeted by a waitress. And when we look at this waitress, she has a very uncanny, creepy look on her face. And I don't mean this to be insulting to the actress, because I'm fully convinced that this was on purpose. She has a very, very forced smile to the point that it's pretty uncomfortable. There is the obvious trope of, telling women to smile. Women are expected to smile. But this is so much more insidious, I think, than people realize. Well, women might realize it, but I don't think men and society as a whole really acknowledges how insidious this is. Women are so often expected to perform with a smile, and this is especially enforced in workplaces that are customer-facing, such as waitressing. And I think we are supposed to feel uncomfortable by this woman's smile, because she is uncomfortable having to force this smile all day long. Now, a more important point, and probably the point you're expecting me to make in the first place. This is where Elizabeth meets with 207 once again. Only this time, 207 is in his older body. He goes on this long, crazy rant about the effects that the substance is having on his life, and probing Elizabeth on if the same is happening to her. He does this in a very weird, almost threatening manner. And I just want to say, this scene alone proves both selves share a consciousness. First of all, 207 would have no idea who Elizabeth even is if they did not share a consciousness, because the first time she met him, he was in his young form. He goes as far as to wink at her to signify that he knows who she is, he remembers her, and he followed her there. The way that it seems 207 pushed the substance onto Elizabeth while fully aware of its consequences makes me think about all the people, and honestly this is usually women in real life, are victims of harmful beauty procedures, yet they still push it onto other people. Let's not forget his letter that came with the flash drive that said, "This changed my life." And while that may not be a lie, it clearly had a different implication than how he really meant it. Now, was 207 also brainwashed about this? To a degree, yes. To a certain point, yes. But by the point that he pushed this onto Elizabeth, I do think that he was fully aware of how harmful the substance was. But to push those same ideals onto others really is just a shared suffering. Now, when fleeing the diner, Elizabeth runs into Boy Toy Troy. And I mean, she literally physically runs into him. It is safe to say that he is a complete jerk about the entire situation, which is a stark contrast to the sweet boy attitude that he was giving Sue earlier on. At home, feeling desperate and alone and afraid, Elizabeth stumbles upon Fred's phone number, and, wanting to take the plunge, she decided to set up a date with him. This is a much needed step for Elizabeth to reclaim her life. She needs to be taking active steps without Sue. So far, this is the first instance we really see of her doing that. While Fred is a nice guy, he is a very flat, one-dimensional character, more of a plot device to move things along for Elizabeth than he is a full-fleshed character. This mirrors how female characters are often treated in the media. So often you will read a book or see a movie and there will be a female character and all she really does is exist as a romantic interest, and to me, that's exactly what Fred is here. I'm not saying it's right, but I honestly really like how they're doing all this, like, gender reversal flip of all these, like, horrible tropes that we need to get rid of. I can't think of a better way to prove a point, to be honest. This idea does also extend to Boy Toy Troy, as well as a character later, just like an unnamed boyfriend character of Sue's. These characters only exist to serve as props for our female leads. Now, this date scene is a pivotal moment for our main character and makes a huge impact on the audience. Putting on a striking red dress and decorative gloves to cover her mangled finger, Elizabeth looks ready to take on the world. That is, until she starts looking in the mirror a little too long. We keep coming back to this dreaded bathroom mirror imagery. I have heard so many women and girls talk about how the bathroom mirror is a woman's worst enemy. This movie portrays that so well. And this scene is only one of many that makes that point. Really, the bathroom mirror robs women of their time and their confidence. Women and girls will spend countless hours in their lifetimes checking to make sure that every hair is in place, that there's no makeup smudges, no new wrinkles. All of these scenes reflect on that sad reality. Looking down at Sue's sleeping form is really what seems to make Elizabeth falter. The minutes start to pass. She's, like I said, scrutinizing her looks, making sure her face is perfect. She finally feels ready to go. She leaves the bathroom, starts to get ready to walk out the door, and then she is greeted with the big billboard across the window. Now, this is not the first time in the film that they show the billboard, but this is one of its most significant moments in the film. This billboard image of Sue represents every perfect, flawless model that we see in the magazines, in our cell phones when we're scrolling on social media. All the perfect women that we are supposed to strive to be. The ideal that we are supposed to measure up to. But another important thing about this billboard, this is actually another point that I saw on Reddit. This billboard was not here at the beginning of the movie. Obviously, we're going to be thinking about the billboard scene from earlier when Elizabeth crashed her car. However, that billboard was in a completely different location. Early in the film, we see that there's absolutely nothing across from that window. And the billboard only appears after Sue appears. Again, this is a sign that this is not rooted in reality, that these are metaphors, symbols, and themes that we are supposed to interpret to understand what this movie is telling us. The main point can be surface level here, but you have to look at all these strange little details to really get it. But Elizabeth just totally loses it when she's about to walk out the door and sees her distorted reflection in the doorknob. This, in contrast with Sue's unachievable perfection, takes such a huge blow to her confidence that she can't bear to go to this date yet. We see her at the mirror again to to scrutinize her appearance. I see a lot of people, of course, pointing out like she is trying to change her appearance more, maybe trying to look younger, but really what I'm seeing is she's trying to cover herself up. She is adding heavier makeup, darker makeup. She is adding scarves to cover herself. She's covering her cleavage up with her dress. She is doing just about all she can to try to cover her true self. And eventually she realizes that she just can't do that. There is no hiding her true self. She's stuck with herself. And sadly for Elizabeth, her self isn't enough. And she bails on the date. Fred texts her repeatedly, asking her where she is, and she never responds. A lot of people talk about how she did Fred dirty and how this is such a sad moment for Fred. And like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's sad for Fred. Yeah, okay, it is. It is. I'm not denying that. It's sad for Fred. But this is devastating for Elizabeth because this is showing us that she doesn't think she's worthy of love, of real, genuine love. All this time she's been chasing love and acceptance and approval from the world. And here's a guy who actually has the potential to love her for her as a person, as she is. And she does not think she's worthy of that. And personally, I think that hits a little bit deeper than being ghosted on a date once. I don't know. Since the date is now out of the question, Elizabeth decides to stay home and eat alone in the isolation of her lonely apartment. Next, we see a strange dream sequence involving Sue. All of the dream sequences in this movie seem to manifest from Elizabeth's fears regarding her appearance, but this one is definitely the most obvious in that regard. During filming of an episode of Pump It Up, a large, unsightly bump appears on Sue's asset. At first, no one seems to take notice, but the cast and crew are quickly told to gather around this monitor because a strange anomaly was captured on the camera. Everyone gathers around the monitor, staring at Sue's asset in a comically uncomfortable manner. Like, when I saw this, I laughed, and every single review I saw of anyone talking about this, they laughed. But for Sue, this was not funny. She was mortified, and she wanted to get the hell out of there. So she fled to the bathroom, where she went to inspect this mystery lump. Here, she kind of moves it around, touches it. It's gross. It's really gross, but it moves and shifts around under her skin, and she moves it up to her belly, and then she proceeds to pull a greasy chicken leg out of her belly button. Somehow, I didn't even see anyone make a joke about this, but to me, this is clearly a representation of Elizabeth's fear of food going straight to her asset. After actually awaking, Sue sees a mess of dirty dishes, food, and chicken bones scattered around the living room. This binging episode is clearly what led to that weird-ass dream. At work, the producer promises Sue a premium gig hosting the New Year's Eve time slot for their network. This is a golden opportunity for Sue, and she's over the moon about it. Along with this come a list of other opportunities for Sue, and she doesn't want to give any of that up by sacrificing her time. Of course, that means she'll just have to take more from Elizabeth. As we know, Elizabeth will not come through this unscathed. The damage done by this is much more severe than the first time. This time affecting about half of her face, one leg, I'd assume half of her whole body. Her hair is gray and wiry. She has not only aged, but has a big, painful, knotted lump in her leg. It seems that she is deforming or having growths or something medically not good. There also seems to be a noticeable mental decline in Elizabeth. When she calls customer service once again, she is now told that she can stop the experience. But after being told once again that the current damage is irreversible, she declines to do so. At this point, She just can't cope with the state of her body, and she can't see her life without Sue. Elizabeth finally unwraps her shitty cookbook gift and goes on a binge-eating frenzy like no other. All the while, she watches a talk show featuring Sue, where she makes snarky, backhanded comments about Elizabeth and her legacy. Here is where we see the concept of duality of self in full force. Elizabeth is seething. As she cooks, she is pretty much yelling at the TV, yelling at Sue, blaming her for stealing her spotlight, stealing her beauty, stealing her life. Elizabeth is seething with so much hatred for Sue that she can't recognize her as a side of herself. Both sides have so much hatred for each other that they have created two separate personas entirely. But when we really break it down, what we are seeing is a portrayal of self-hatred and self-harm. Elizabeth gets so angry and goes so far as to paste newspaper on the window over Sue's billboard to cover it up. At this point, both women have gone to extreme lengths to hide the other from themselves. We are shown a subtle moment of self-awareness here, where Elizabeth is standing in front of the bathroom mirror, looking herself in the eye as she curses Sue, insults her, and casts blame on her for all the things that have gone wrong in her life. This shows us that deep inside she knows that this hatred is really directed at herself. She isn't really yelling at Sue anymore. Even if she's saying Sue, she is yelling at herself. Finding the house in total chaos, Sue decides to take things into her own hands. Convinced that she can work around the rules, she robs Elizabeth of as much stabilizer fluid as humanly possible. She just fills vials and like jars, not even vials, jars and jars full of this stuff. And she is not gentle with that needle, I'll tell you. It is at this moment that Sue decides that she will be the primary personality. After 3 months and just leading up to her New Year's Eve gig, Sue runs out of stabilizer fluid. This means that she has no choice but to switch so that more stabilizer fluid can be produced. Going quickly to switch, she neglects to tell her new boy toy in the other room. But like I said, he doesn't really matter. He's just a plot device. Elizabeth wakes up to a living nightmare. She is not only aged, but horrifically disfigured, with a hunched back, bald head, and cartoonishly saggy breast. Just the sound of her haggard, sickly voice scares away Sue's new boyfriend. His purpose now served, he flees in the nude. See, I'm telling you, he's supposed to be the one who they put in there just to be like the nude hottie. That's his purpose. She calls customer service and demands to stop the experience, presumably having reached her breaking point. She then proceeds to pull out the portrait from the beginning of the film, the smiling portrait of herself. This is a symbol of Elizabeth's self-worth. She's finally starting to see the worth in herself. Disguising herself with scarves and shawls, Elizabeth takes off to get her final package. Now, here is where we see my favorite scene in the entire movie. Creepo douchebro neighbor pops out as Elizabeth is leaving, expecting to see Sue. Instead, he's greeted with this. Sue, back off! Whenever a guy is acting sleazy, that's what I want to do. Just so the guys out there know. That shit is not flattering. This is what women are thinking when you're being a sleazeball. The final package contains a big syringe full of black termination fluid. Just before she plunges it into Sue's chest, she's stopped by a voice in her head. The voice from the Substance commercial. This voice booms doubts in her ear, reiterating that she will be on her own, which is clearly a big insecurity and fear for Elizabeth. Even when women do take steps to reject beauty standards, all those little voices from advertisements and from society can creep into our head and dominate our thoughts. Because our entire lives we have always been told it is not okay to exist as you are. You need this product. You need this diet. You need this and that to be acceptable. There is always that little shadow of doubt that it is okay to just exist in our natural state. And I think that's exactly why this voice that she's hearing is the voice from the substance advertisement. She ignores this voice and injects the termination fluid. Well, most of it, at least. She begins to fantasize about the love and admiration she used to receive, the love and admiration she still receives as Sue. So desperate still for outside approval, Elizabeth quickly tries to reverse the termination process. While this happens, she pleads and says, "I need you. I love you," to Sue, which is all the more tragic after we see what happens next. Injecting the switch valve straight into Sue's heart seems to bring her back, but not like before. Now, both women are conscious at the same time, which seems to defy all laws of the substance, at least all known laws. When Sue sees that she was almost terminated, she becomes absolutely enraged and brutally attacks Elizabeth. Sue's brutality shows us that no matter how much we love and rely on artificial beauty, it will never love us back. In fact, it will do nothing but destroy you after you've given it everything you have. One detail I liked was there were ties to artificial femininity in the pink accents throughout the room. We do see some of these throughout the movie, mostly during Sue's scenes. But I just noticed that the pink accents popped a lot more in this scene. There was pink on the walls, on the couch, Sue's outfit. And all of this really contrasts with Elizabeth's outfit, which is her signature yellow jacket and a gray outfit underneath. Yellow and gray are seen as some of the world's ugliest colors. And I don't think that these colors were used on accident. However, I do still think that the yellow jacket represents that little piece of Elizabeth that is her, that will always be there. Like the sun, Elizabeth's true self shines through this artificial world of pink. In this gruesome attack, Elizabeth succumbs to her injuries, leaving us to wonder what will happen to Sue. Later that night, Sue gets ready to host the big event. Once she arrives and she's all dressed and ready, she becomes suddenly ill with coughing fits, and she rushes to the bathroom. Here, things take a turn for Sue as her teeth begin to fall out. As this happens, she pulls out more. Sue, being a direct personification of artificial beauty, falls apart without Elizabeth. Sue's entire existence is artificial, which is an unsustainable state of being. No matter how much damage Elizabeth endured, she stayed in one piece because she was held together by her humanity, her personhood. Youth and beauty alone are not sustainable. Trying to flee, Sue is stopped by the producer. He wants to introduce her to the shareholders, who are a group of generic old white men. Here, they urge her to smile for them. This goes back to the performance thing that we were talking about earlier. They don't see Sue as a person, really. Not because of what she is, but because she's a woman. They see her as an object to perform for them, an object to make profits for them. And that is exactly why this group is portrayed as a group of old white men, because that is showing the primary group that benefits and profits off of women's beauty. The men set these standards, the men profit from these standards, and the women suffer. These men see women as personal entertainment and dollar signs. And this can't be made more clear than the fact that they only leave Sue alone to chase down the topless dancers, a more enticing form of entertainment and profit. Sue continues to fall apart as she heads home, now her nails peeling off of her fingers. It's quite gross, I promise. At the instruction of a voice in her head, the voice from the substance commercial, she injects herself with the remaining fluid in the vial for the substance. Here, the screen shows us a little sticker that says, "One-time use, dispose after use," showing us, yeah, you're not supposed to do that. Instead of splitting into two like before, her eyes split into dozens of eyes. And this is showing us that the substance is not working as intended. The first time that we saw this, when Elizabeth took the substance, they showed a flaming heart image. And I didn't go over that earlier, but I kind of had a hard time analyzing that one. I believe that this represents desire. A woman's desire to be beautiful, to be valued, to be loved. And that has been Elizabeth's desire all along. Now we see a sort of inverted, warped heart image that's like extremely similar to the other one. I think this shows that her desire for love and acceptance has been warped into something hideous. What emerges from Sue is nothing short of a monstrosity. This character is called Monstro Elizasu, but we're just going to call her a Monstro. It is hard to describe how Monstro looks. I'm sure you've seen, and I'll be having images here. But Monstro is a hideously deformed configuration of both Elizabeth and Sue, and other growths and body parts and things. There are eyes and teeth where there shouldn't be. There are big lumpy growths. On the back of Monstro, we see Elizabeth's face and one of her arms reaching out. It is horrifying. Seriously, my God, that is nightmare fuel. And the main face, I'd assume, is supposed to be Sue under all those growths and things, but I'm not entirely sure on that. Now, as Monstro examines herself in the mirror, we hear some of the sexist comments throughout the movie that led her to this state. Next, we see Monstro putting on her dress and getting dolled up for the event. Even after unimaginable disfigurement, Monstro is still trying to adhere to beauty standards. She goes so far as to burn off her last strand of hair and pierce her skin to still try to be beautiful. Once you're in too deep, it can really seem impossible to escape beauty routines. They are far more insidious than most people give credit for. To finish off her look, Monstro pastes a picture of Elizabeth's face over her own. And this picture is taken from the portrait that we've been seeing throughout the movie. After all this, she finally sees the value in the person that she was. But sadly, at this point, it's too late for her. At the show, we see the topless dancers preparing on stage. In the audience, we see glamorous men, women, and even a little girl in a princess dress. In fact, this girl's dress does resemble Sue's dress, and this girl is super excited for the show to start. It was really driving me crazy when I was watching other reviews of this movie, and so many people brought up this little girl's presence because it's so out of place. This is clearly a very sexualized event, and that's what people latch on to. They latch on to, okay, why is this kid here? This kid shouldn't be here. And yeah, I agree. But again, that is missing the point entirely. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure some people did get it in their minds, but no one's talking about it. So what's the point? I want to talk about this girl's symbolic significance and why she is here. This symbolizes how girls are groomed into these beauty standards, into sexualization and objectification from a very, very young age. Girls just dream to be the pretty women that they see on screen. They don't understand the context of how these women are treated or how these women are viewed by the world. They don't understand sexualization and objectification. They just see a pretty woman that inspires them. And that kind of socialization can stick with a person for the rest of their lives. In fact, I have a pretty decent personal example that I think a lot of women around my age can relate to. When I was a little kid, I remember my dad would watch the Victoria's Secret runway shows. And, of course, I thought those women were like princesses. I thought that they were so beautiful, so stunning. Obviously, other people thought that they were beautiful and stunning and awesome. So, where does my little girl mind go? I want to be like that. I want to be like those women. I didn't understand the real reason that he was watching that, or why other people were watching that. I did not understand the sexualized context that this was a lingerie runway show. None of that registered or really mattered to my child mind. The same goes for how popular the Playboy stuff was, like in the 2010s, like when I was a teenager. It is disgusting to think about how many young teen girls had Playboy logos on their clothes, on posters in their room. Honestly, I can't believe that people were okay with that back then. And that wasn't even that long ago. Monstro approaches the front of the stage without issue because nobody has yet recognized her for what she is. Though she does start to get some strange looks, there are no reactions from the crowd until she leaks a titty from her face. I am really so sorry. I could not think of a better or different way to describe that. At this point, people start to get out of their seats, start to scream. The mother of that little girl finally covers her eyes, even though there have been topless dancers all over the place this whole time. And this perfectly portrays the attitude that people have about things being okay when for a sexualized purpose. I might have worded that strangely, but I can't think of a good way. So let me give you a couple examples. For example, men seem to love the idea of topless movements unless it's an overweight, old, or otherwise conventionally unattractive woman partaking. Another example, people seem to love girl-on-girl action until it's two butches or something, or two older women. Then it's a problem because it's not sexy. The sexy topless dancers get a pass, but Monstro's freaky tit leak gets no pass. The crowd calls Monstro a monster and a freak, and they call for her death. All the while, Monstro pleads with them to accept her because she's still the same person. This really signifies the way that women are treated when they have had too much work done. They spend all of their time and money and effort striving to become what the world tells them they should be. And when it goes well, she's praised for that. But when it goes poorly or she crosses that line and goes too far, then it is okay for society to treat her as if she's a monster. Now she is subject to ridicule and disrespect for getting this work done. Now she has to deal with not only the physical damages, but social alienation as well. Monstro did everything she could to be beautiful, and this is how she was repaid for that. This is where the gore ramps up to an insane degree. A man hits Monstro in the head, causing her head to explode all over the place, where a new one grows in its place. Her arm then proceeds to just snap off of her body, and blood showers all over the crowd. You know, showers isn't even the right word. It shoots like a fire hose all over the crowd. The blood here represents female rage. Finally, she has turned her anger on those who have harmed her, those who have put these expectations on her and treated her like shit, instead of turning those feelings back on herself. She can finally hate these standards instead of hating herself. And you know what? I'm with Monstro. Fuck you, society, for doing this to us. We hear the sexist comments that we've heard throughout the movie as Monstro twirls, flooding the space with her blood, with her rage. Stumbling into the street, Monstro's legs burst, causing her to fall to the concrete and splatter everywhere, falling completely apart at last. Elizabeth's disembodied face breaks free and crawls away from the visage, settling on her Hollywood star from the start of the film. Her final moments are spent fantasizing about the love and admiration she received, smiling as she dissolves into a bloody pool on her star. This image mirrors the ketchup spill from the beginning of the movie, our final shot being a cleaner scrubbing away the last of Elizabeth. This says to me that her memory and accomplishments will live on even after the world has tried to wash her away. This shows us that women and girls have worth as human beings, and that youth and beauty have no bearing on that. Elizabeth is one of the women who let beauty destroy her before she could see her true value. When we break it down, Elizabeth is the everyday woman. She may be famous in the context of this universe, but all of the struggles portrayed here are the struggles of every woman. Sue, on the other hand, is the ideal concept of what society wants a woman to be, the standard that women are meant to adhere to. These standards are vapid and unrealistic and unsustainable. On her own, Sue is a shell. In conjunction with Elizabeth, she's a tool of self-destruction. And the same can be said for beauty standards. The more we give in to beauty standards, the more power that we give it. And when we do give in, all we're doing is hurting ourselves. Beauty standards and the lengths people will go to achieve them have just horrible, horrible effects on women's well-being. And honestly, it sets us apart from the rest of humanity. It sets us apart in such a subtle, insidious way that we've all just accepted it. But personally, I don't think we should accept it. I think that women need to collectively reclaim our humanity and to reject these standards before more of us turn into monstro. With that said, I'm Dia Ghoul, and I hope you had a spooky time. Like and subscribe if you want.